All right. Good afternoon, students. If I'm audible, please let me know. I hope you're doing well. All right. Now, in our previous lecture, we were talking about the Mesolithic Age. We had talked about the climatic changes. We had talked about the Mesolithic technology. We had also talked about the subsistence pattern. We had talked about the settlement and dwelling pattern. We had talked about their society and culture. इनफैक्ट हमने लास्ट में यही डिस्कशन किया था. क्या क्या चीज़ें देखे थे हमने? दैट Mesolithic society was a transitional phase between the Paleolithic band society and the settled society of the Neolithic age, and thus it was a more developed form of band society. Human competition had given way to human cooperation, as a result of which, corporate identity or corporate organization had started to emerge. Then we had also learnt that family had emerged as the mainstay of the society. It had emerged as the basic building block of the society. It was characterized by consciousness of lineage or ancestry, and functionally it was defined by division of labor on the basis of age and gender, right? We had also talked about Mesolithic religion. कुछ डिस्कशन हुआ था इसके बारे में अभी तक? हाँ, सो रिलीजन के बारे में देखो, हमें क्या पता लगता है? रिलीजन वाज एनिमिस्टिक. ठीक है, सो एनिमिज्म defined the religious belief system of the Mesolithic people. What are animistic cults or animistic religions? Central belief क्या होता है? That all objects, that is both living and non-living, have a spirit or soul. ठीक है, and thus are they going to have any impact, direct or indirect, on the lives of ordinary human beings or not? होगा. Thus they directly or indirectly influence human existence or human life. ठीक है. Now, why do you think that their religion was defined by animism? What was the environment that the Mesolithic people used to live in? How did they used to obtain their food? What did their survival depend upon? It depended upon nature, their environment. So therefore, they had developed a great emotional connection with their environment. with the tools that they were using and with the animals that they depended upon. And in fact, they had attributed some divine attributes to these things. And as a result, what are we going to find? That animal figures were the most well represented in Mesolithic art or Mesolithic paintings. ठीक है? So if we are looking for the most accurate depictions, the most vibrant and colorful depictions of any kinds of objects or figures, क्या सामने आता है? Animal figures. What does this tell us? That the Mesolithic people had been giving almost god-like reverence to these animal figures. तो उनको supernatural beings की तरह देखा जाता था, who have the ability to directly influence the lives of ordinary human beings. And since we have touched upon paintings, let us talk about them in greater detail. Mesolithic Age was the most prolific age for rock paintings. कहाँ से मिलते हैं ये? From everywhere where Mesolithic people used to live. Some of the most famous collections come from places such as भीमबेटका, सुहागी घाट, सुंदरगढ़, आंध्र प्रदेश, तमिलनाडु, कर्नाटका, etc. ठीक है? In Bhimbetka, we find paintings belonging to various ages. The earliest paintings belong to the Upper Paleolithic Age, and the latest paintings belong to the Medieval Age. However, more than 60% of these paintings belong to the Mesolithic period alone. What does this tell us? That Mesolithic Age was the most prolific age for rock paintings. Were there any changes with regards to the depiction of these paintings from the earlier period? Yes. Earlier, what was the most prominent theme? Animal and bird paintings. ठीक है? Mesolithic period में they are going to continue. But certain new themes are going to emerge as well, such as hunting and gathering activities, such as community scenes, such as feasts or festivals, gatherings of people, dance, music, etc. ये सब देखने के लिए मिल जाएगा. What else? family scenes we start to get. Example, cooking of food, taking care of children, etc. राइट, ये सब चीजें देखने के लिए मिलती हैं. देन वी ऑल्सो स्टार्ट फाइंडिंग एब्स्ट्रैक्ट सीन्स. मतलब एब्स्ट्रैक्ट पेंटिंग्स क्या होती हैं? ऐसी पेंटिंग जिसमें ऑब्जेक्ट क्लियर नहीं होता है. दी subject matter is not clear in the first instance. So these are derived from the things that the painter was observing. So abstract scenes such as geometrical or naturalistic designs. Then we start seeing new types of paintings known as X-ray paintings. Right? ये किस तरह की पेंटिंग्स होती हैं? Paintings in which internal organs of the object are shown. For example, if it is a human figure, so internal organs of a pregnant female, including the child within her womb, that is going to be depicted. Or if it is an animal figure, then the internal organs of that animal are going to be depicted. So these kinds of things are going to be shown, right? Now, further change we find is in the discrepancy with which animal and human figures are shown. एनिमल फिगर्स को कैसा अपीयरेंस दिया गया है? एनाटॉमिकली एक्यूरेट, कलरफुल, lifelike and vibrant or youthful appearance, almost as if they are the very source of life. ठीक है? ह्यूमन फिगर्स में क्या देखने के लिए मिला गया है? Men and women are shown using different techniques. Women को कैसे दिखाया जाता है? In 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional form? 3-dimensional form में दिखाया जाता है. Women have a full-bodied figure, but the level of attention to detail that is given to animal figures is missing. ठीक है? Men on the other hand are treated with the most disdain. इनको कैसे दिखाया जाता है? As stick figures. Why do you think this is? It goes back to the belief system, right? Animals को कैसे treat किया जाता था? Almost as supernatural beings. There was a deep emotional connection between men and animals, humans and animals. Who was in charge of hunting activities primarily, men or women? Men. ठीक है? Now the killing of animals, उसको किस तरह की एक्टिविटी की तरह देखा जाता होगा? Unnecessary but sinful activity, right? So the killing of animals by these hunters must have evoked some sense of guilt, some sense of sinfulness. And it is obvious that these people did not want them to be directly associated with the act of killing animals. Women on the other hand were gender based division of labor. कैसा होता था? They were in charge of what kinds of activities? cooking, child rearing, child bearing, giving care to the members of the family, and gathering activities. They were not directly involved in the killing of animals, and that is why that associated sense of guilt was absent in the case of women. That is why a more accurate depiction of women was possible. Okay. Now, between men and women, ज्यादा इकोनॉमिकली प्रोडक्टिव रोल्स कौन परफॉर्म कर रहे थे, men or women? Women were in charge of gathering food, child rearing, and cooking activities, whereas men were primarily involved only in the hunting activities, right? So society had more need for women as compared to men, and this may also reflect the discrepancy in the way in which men and women are shown. ज़्यादा importance यहाँ पे किसको दिया गया है? Women को, which reflects their greater importance in the economic cycle. Then coming back to religion, क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है हमें? What did the people do with their dead bodies? Did they simply discard them, or did they bury them in a proper manner? Buried them in a proper manner. Ritualistic burial becomes evident from across all the Mesolithic sites. कुछ common traits देखने के लिए मिलते हैं. For example, the dead bodies are always buried in a north-south orientation. Head towards the north, feet towards the south. We also find that in many cases, red or ochre colored shroud is put over the dead before burying them, right? And why are we associating the cult of ritualism with these burials? क्योंकि इनको bury करने का एक proper तरीका follow किया जाता था, which must have been part of some ritualistic ceremony. Why do you think such practices became evident during the Mesolithic period? क्यों emerge हुए होंगे इस तरह के practices? Couple of factors. First of all, it must have become a matter of practical necessity for them. कैसे? Were human beings during the Mesolithic period also constantly moving around in search of shelter and food like the Paleolithic people? They were, but not with the same frequency and not to the same extent. In fact, they were spending several months together at the same place. और कुछ permanent fishing villages तो emerge हो चुके थे इस समय तक. Would it have made sense for these people to simply discard their dead wherever they fell? तो सेटलमेंट के अंदर भी हो सकता है, सेटलमेंट्स के आउटस्कर्ट्स पे भी हो सकता है, राइट? दिस वुड हैव बीन एक्सट्रीमली अनहाइजीनिक. इट मे हैव रिजल्टेड इन सम डिस्कम्फर्ट आल्सो, राइट? देयरफॉर इनको बेरी करना एक प्रैक्टिकल नेसेसिटी बन चुका था. एंड सेकेंडली, by this point of time, the social organization was becoming more complex. The emotional bonds between different individuals were becoming stronger. Growing consciousness of lineage was emerging. As family unit became stronger and stronger, it became the basic building block of the society. Awareness and consciousness of being part of that unit became dominant, right? And people started having the consciousness that they and their ancestors are connected to each other through this genetic link. तो एक bloodline flow कर रही है, which connects them to their ancestors. There is going to be greater reverence and greater respect for the elderly, right? Emotional bonds are also going to become stronger as the entire family unit is looked at as a single whole. And when some loved one dies, उसको रिस्पेक्टफुली सेंड ऑफ करने का एक रिचुअल स्टार्ट हो गया, राइट? एंड along with this, as religious consciousness started growing, the idea of life after death, what happens to an individual, the idea of rebirth, etc., ये सब भी zeitgeist में अब आगे आने लग गए, पॉपुलर कॉन्शियसनेस में आगे आने लग गए, राइट? एंड secondly, therefore, growing consciousness of ancestry and the strengthening of family and emotional bonds also facilitated the rise of ritualistic burials. Did the Mesolithic people believe in the concept of life after death? बिलीव करते थे या नहीं करते थे? करते थे। कैसे पता हमें? Because from the graves we have found a number of grave goods such as ornaments, weapons, tools, or even foodstuffs that the dead were supposed to have with them in their afterlife. So these things were also buried with them. Then we also know that they also believed in things such as magic, charms, spells, and ghosts. कैसे पता हमें? Because from many of these graves we have found talismans. So totemic objects, for example, कोई तावीज इनके साथ बेरी कर दिया जाएगा. Some amulet around their arm or around their neck is going to be buried. Ghosts के बारे में कैसे पता? Spirits और ghosts के बारे में believe करते थे या नहीं करते थे? There's a place called चौपानी मांडो in present day उत्तर प्रदेश, मिर्जापुर के पास है ये. वहां से कुछ skeletons ऐसे मिले हैं जिनके पैरों को काट दिया गया था पोस्टमार्टम. आफ्टर दे डाइड देयर फीट हैड बीन चॉप्ड ऑफ बिलो द एंकल्स. व्हाट डज दिस सिग्निफाई? दैट कवर से ये उठ करके पीछा ना करने लग जाए रात के अंधेरे में, राइट? So they believed that spirits could possess these dead bodies and make them act, right? So these kinds of things are indicative of such beliefs. So philosophical as well as superstitious beliefs were starting to develop during this period. इतना क्लियर है? अच्छा. Then we also come to know about emerging social and economic hierarchies. Do you think at this point of time there would have been very sharp differences between the rich and the poor, between the powerful and the powerless? या फिर differences minute रहे होंगे? Minute differences थे, लेकिन differences emerge होने शुरू हो गए थे. कैसे पता हमें? Once again by analyzing the graves. In the graves of the more richer and powerful people, you will find objects of greater value. You will find larger number of objects. While in the graves of the ordinary people, what are we going to find? Ordinary objects, fewer objects, objects of lesser value. These kinds of things we are going to find. Okay? So this is a glimpse of Mesolithic society and culture. ठीक है? तो एक क्वेश्चन लिखो. Mesolithic paintings present a window into the Mesolithic way of life. Present a window into the Mesolithic way of life. A blank screen and no audio. I hope it is better now, Norez. Okay. Mesolithic paintings present a window into the Mesolithic way of life. Elaborate. 200 words, 15 marks. कैसे एड्रेस कर सकते हैं इस क्वेश्चन को? इन द इंट्रोडक्शन क्या लिखना चाहिए हमें? The Mesolithic Age was the most prolific phase for rock paintings in the prehistoric ages. Full stop. They shed light upon dimensions such as, इसके किसके बारे में बताते हैं हमको? The subsistence pattern, dwelling and settlement, community life, social structure, religion, and the belief systems of the Mesolithic people. ठीक है, अब हमें क्या करना है? एक एक करके इन सारे डायमेंशंस को एक्सपैंड करना है. Mesolithic paintings reflect a hunter-gatherer lifestyle with abundant hunting scenes and gathering scenes. Animals such as the wolf, rhinoceros, buffalo, wild boar, etc. are vibrantly depicted. ठीक है, the community life, community scenes such as feasts, festivals, and gatherings reflect the growing community bonds. Social structure. We find that the family unit was getting stronger with a proper age and gender based division of roles. ठीक. फर्दर और किसके बारे में बात करनी है हमें? Dwelling in settlement, community life, social structure, religion, belief systems. Religion. Animistic cults are evident from these paintings. The Mesolithic people appear to be almost reverential towards animals. Towards animals. Then belief systems. The discovery of abstract paintings and X-ray paintings depict that the Mesolithic people had started to grapple with philosophical questions such as X-ray paintings क्या दिखाते हैं? That human beings were becoming more aware about the cycle of life. For them, the cycle of life began before the act of birth itself, at this point of conception. So they were becoming more aware about the beginning and ending of life. They had therefore also started questioning their own lives, their meanings, and the meaning of their existence. Abstract paintings, for example, एक जगह है जावरा इन प्रेजेंट डे महाराष्ट्र, वहां पे इस तरह का एक एब्स्ट्रैक्ट डिजाइन मिला हुआ है. तो देखने में क्या लग रहा है ये? व्हाट डज दिस लुक लाइक? अर्थ लग रहा है, और द सर्फेस ऑफ द अर्थ एंड द सबटेरेनियन वर्ल्ड, राइट? So they had also started to talk about the nature of the earth and what it represents. They must have started developing ideas such as the subterranean world or a cosmic world beyond the world that is actually apparent to them. So this means that they had started to grapple with philosophical questions, and ऐसा पहली बार मीजोलिथिक पीरियड में देखने के लिए हमें मिलता है. इज दिस क्लियर? अच्छा, ये तो हमने अलग अलग डायमेंशंस देख लिए. नेक्स्ट क्या करना है हमें? दीज ऑब्जर्वेशंस आर ऑल्सो confirmed by their other archaeological remains. यहाँ पे एक दो एग्जाम्पल्स आप दे सकते हैं that how the picture reflected in these paintings is also reflected in the archaeology. Example: the ritualistic burial of the dead with grave goods reflects their belief in the concept of life after death. ठीक है? Next example: the discovery of fish and animal bones from Mesolithic settlements tells us about their hunting and fishing activities. ठीक है? So आपने किया क्या है? In this way you have been successful in telling about the importance of Mesolithic paintings in recreating the pattern of life during that period, and you have also been able to convince the examiner that this painting, this picture is reliable because the same record is also reflected in the archaeological findings. अब क्या करना है हमें? A note of caution, ठीक है? और shortcoming that you need to highlight. However, rich as Mesolithic paintings are, they can never be used to create an accurate and detailed picture of the Mesolithic way of life. Once again, you will take an example. एक एग्जाम्पल आप ले सकते हो. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, that while it is possible for us to say that the Mesolithic people followed a religion which was characterized by some sort of belief in animistic rituals, or animism was the basis of their religious beliefs. But will it be possible for us to say that which particular Mesolithic community or which particular Mesolithic group of people or culture worshipped which particular animal और which particular god? ये possible होगा हमारे लिए बोलना? नहीं possible होगा. Example, while these paintings reflect an animistic belief system, it is not possible for us to pinpoint with accuracy which community worshipped which god or animal. Is this clear? इस एग्जाम्पल के थ्रू हम इस शॉर्टकमिंग को भी हाईलाइट करेंगे, एंड देन फाइनली वी आर गोइंग टू कंक्लूड. किस नोट पे कंक्लूड करना चाहिए हमें? Go back to the question. What is the wording of the question? Mesolithic paintings present us with a window into the life of the Mesolithic people. Elaborate, right? So that is the point that we need to drive home. और कैसे कर सकते हैं? By saying कि अगर Mesolithic paintings हमारे पास अवेलेबल नहीं होती तो हमारा क्या अंडरस्टैंडिंग होता, ठीक है? So however, it would be unfair to dismiss the importance of Mesolithic paintings to study the Mesolithic Age. These paintings do not simply reflect or do not simply represent a living record of that phase, but also offer a glimpse into the Mesolithic mind. And in the tripartite division of the prehistoric age, हमने Mesolithic period को क्या importance assign किया है? That it is the transitional phase between the Paleolithic to the Neolithic age. And वो जो process of transformation हो रहा था, उसको समझने के लिए सबसे important resource क्या है हमारे पास? These paintings. Being the transformational stage between the Paleolithic and Neolithic ages and incomplete, or you can say being the transformational stage between Paleolithic and Neolithic ages, had Mesolithic paintings not existed, we would never have been able to chart the evolution of human beings from food consumers to food producers, right? So this is the way in which we can address this particular question. Okay, right? तो ये हो गया the Mesolithic age. सारे एस्पेक्ट्स कवर कर लिया हमने. We have talked about the climate, we have talked about the technology, subsistence के बारे में बात कर ली, settlement and dwelling के बारे में बात कर लिया हमने. We had talked about the geographical footprint, we have talked about their society and culture, including the social structure, the emerging of community life, the emergence of family structure, the gender-based division of labor, their religious beliefs and practices, the growing philosophical depth of the Mesolithic man, as well as his emerging superstitious beliefs and practices. All right. Now we move on to the last phase of the Stone Age. क्या है ये? The Neolithic Age. Time period 6000 BC to roughly 1000 BC. Now, as always, I want to remind you that these dates are always relative. कुछ जगहों पर Neolithic age started as early as 8000 BC. In some other places, it started as late as 2000 BC. In some places, Neolithic cultures transformed into Chalcolithic ages by as early as 4000 BC, and in some places, it took as late as 1000 BC. ठीक है? So that is why ये इतना लंबा हमने period लिया है 5000 years ka. Now, what are the things that we have to talk about? Same things: climatic changes, changes in the human population, changes in technology, changes in the subsistence pattern, changes in the dwelling pattern, settlement pattern, their society and culture, etc. Right? First of all, climatic changes. क्या दिखाएगा हमें? So the process which started with the end of the Pleistocene, that is only going to carry on. Ever since the end of the Pleistocene, what was happening to the climate? It was becoming warmer, wetter and milder, more conducive for human existence. Okay? The same process is going to reach a new height during this period. So, climate continued becoming warmer, wetter and milder. Okay? In response to this, what is going to happen to the human population? जितना था उतना ही रहेगा, उससे कम होगा या ज्यादा होगा? बढ़ जाएगा. Human population is going to increase. And with this, what is going to happen to the balance between population and resources? स्टेबल रहेगा, इंस्टेबिलिटी आएगा, कुछ थोड़ा इंस्टेबिलिटी आएगा. वेयर इज दिस इंस्टेबिलिटी गोइंग टू प्रेजेंट इटसेल्फ मोस्ट acutely? In the population pressure and the availability of food. ठीक है. So demand for food is also going to intensify. ठीक है. Now how to overcome this shortage of food? By making changes in which the human beings use tools and the purpose for using these tools. So Neolithic age began with the beginning of agriculture and animal domestication at a large scale. During the Neolithic period, human beings permanently transformed themselves from being consumers of food only to producers of food, right? और इस ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन को फैसिलिटेट करने के लिए सम टेक्नोलॉजिकल चेंजेस वर आल्सो नेसेसरी. इसके पहले पेलियोलिथिक और मीजोलिथिक पीरियड में जो टूल्स बनाए जाते थे, किस स्टोन के बनते थे वो, किस रॉक के? क्वार्ट्जाइट रॉक. इट इज अ मेटामॉर्फिक इग्नियस रॉक विच इज क्रिस्टलाइन इन स्ट्रक्चर. क्वालिटीज क्या होती हैं? इज इट अ सॉफ्ट रॉक और अ हार्ड रॉक? हार्ड रॉक. इट इज अ ड्यूरेबल रॉक और अ ब्रिटल रॉक? ब्रिटल रॉक. तो कड़ा बहुत होता है लेकिन उतनी जल्दी टूट भी जाता है, राइट? नाउ human beings replaced quartzite with basaltic rocks such as granite. ठीक है. Now basaltic rocks such as granite, इनकी क्या क्वालिटीज होती हैं? They are almost as hard as the quartzite rocks themselves, but they are far more durable. So as a result, will it be easier for the people to make tools out of this stone as compared to quartzite, or will it be harder? हार्डर होगा, क्योंकि इसमें ज्यादा प्रोसेसिंग, ज्यादा एफर्ट और ज्यादा टाइम लगेगा. बट ऑन द फ्लिप साइड इसका एक एडवांटेज क्या होगा? ज्यादा ड्यूरेबल है, ज्यादा समय तक चलेंगे. दे विल बी एबल टू सर्व द क्रिएटर्स ऑफ द टूल्स फॉर फार लॉन्गर. दे विल बी मोर वर्सेटाइल आल्सो. ठीक है. एंड नाउ human beings could see the logic in making or in spending a large amount of time, in investing a large amount of effort in making these more durable tools. So more durable tools are going to emerge. Now, while earlier it did not make much sense to refine the quartzite tools which were brittle, अब it would make sense for the people to spend large amounts of time refining these new kinds of tools. So these tools were highly polished and highly grinded. So grinding and polishing से बनाए जाते थे ये tools, right? So grinding and polishing tools became a new characteristic of the stone technology of these people. Right? Now, during the Mesolithic period, हमने क्या देखा था? किस तरह के टूल्स बनाए जाते थे? Microliths, right? Were they to be used in isolation, or were they to be used in combination with some other materials? For example, स्पीयर हेड्स के ऊपर उनको स्पीयर्स के ऊपर लगा दिया जाएगा या फिर एरोज के शाफ्ट के ऊपर लगा दिया जाएगा. So making tools with a combination of stone and wood had been known to human beings ever since the Mesolithic period. Now that same knowledge is going to be applied to this new stone tool technology, and a new variety of tools known as celts emerged. क्या थे ये celts? These were tools with handles such as axes, picks, hammers, plows, etc. ठीक है. Now, one very important change during the Neolithic age was induced by the beginning of agriculture technology में. What was that? देखो, agricultural implements तो emerge होंगे ही होंगे, but for the first time a new kind of tool emerged, that is pottery. What was the purpose of these pots in the earlier phase? Storage. Pots को store करने के लिए यूज किया जाएगा. क्या store करने के लिए? Grains, right? So देखो, pottery was used primarily for storage of grains. Why did it not emerge during the Mesolithic period? Mesolithic lifestyle कैसा था? Hunter-gatherer lifestyle था. So the people had to immediately consume whatever they killed or gathered. There was no question of storing it for later. Whereas in agricultural communities, जो growing cycle होता है वो बहुत लंबा होता है. Harvest cycle is very short. And in the fallow period, the harvest has to be stored over a long period of time, both for the purpose of consumption as well as for the purpose of planting the next crop, right? Therefore, the need for storage emerged. Initially, ये जो pots हैं किस तरह के रहे होंगे? Would these be highly refined pots or would they be coarse pots? Coarse quality के, rough quality के pots रहे होंगे. Fabric would have also been very thick, unrefined रहे होंगे, unpolished रहे होंगे, right? And they were hand turned or wheel turned pots. Handmade pots हुआ करते थे, right? Initially, these were handmade pots, but later the potter's wheel was invented, right? And the invention of the wheel is said to have been a revolutionary development in human evolution. Why? Because it made long distance travel with heavy loads using animal power possible. And how was this revolutionary? कैसे revolutionary था ये? हाँ, बहुत सारे एंगल से. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, trade and communication could be facilitated, exchange networks began to emerge. Communities did not need to produce all the things that they required for survival. In fact, these commodities could be bartered with neighboring or other regional communities. ठीक है? Further, with the exchange of goods, ideas and people were also exchanged. So there was diffusion of culture also, diffusion of language also, diffusion of knowledge also. Knowledge acquired by people of a particular community could be exchanged with people of other communities. So more innovative solutions could be found for generational problems, right? So in the realm of human interaction, in the realm of exchange of goods as well as knowledge, exchange of culture, diffusion of culture, a revolution took place. ठीक है? तो ये हो गए technological changes. When it comes to changes in the subsistence pattern, क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है? Did the Neolithic people completely abandon hunting and gathering activities? No. So, hunting, gathering, and fishing activities continued. लेकिन अब चेंज क्या था? While earlier these were the most important sources of obtaining food, now these became secondary sources of food. ठीक है? However, their relative significance declined. ठीक है? Agriculture and animal husbandry emerged as the most important sources of food. ठीक है? Now, do we find any evidence of the beginning of agriculture and animal husbandry? एविडेंस कोई मिला है? आर्कियोलॉजिकल रिकॉर्ड्स मिले हैं इसके कोई? एग्रीकल्चर और एनिमल हस्बेंड्री की शुरुआत होने के किस तरह की चीजें मिली हैं? We find fossilized, charred and burnt food grains. We find pots and jars containing cooked and uncooked grains from graves. We find the impressions of food grains on pots. So when these pots were still wet, they were placed upon the ground और वहां पे कुछ grains थे, तो वो इस पे imprint छोड़ गए हैं, right? What else? We find the bones of domesticated animals from Neolithic sites. Right? How do we know that these were domesticated animals or not wild animals which had simply been caught and slaughtered? Wild animals को कहाँ पे slaughter किया जाता है, कहाँ kill किया जाता है? Out in the wild or back at home? Out in the wild, but these were all slaughtered close to home. That means they were being kept nearby for the purpose of slaughtering them later. Secondly, if we conduct an analysis of the bone fragments, we find कि हमको किस तरह के एनिमल्स के ज्यादा फ्रैगमेंट्स मिल रहे हैं, यंग मेल्स और यंग फीमेल्स के, यंग मेल्स के, एंड एल्डरली मेल्स और एल्डरली फीमेल्स के, एल्डरली फीमेल्स के मिलते हैं. एंड व्हाई इज दिस? डोमेस्टिकेशन में एक प्रोसेस और इन्वॉल्व होता है, दैट इज नोन एज सेलेक्टिव ब्रीडिंग. क्या होता है ये? सी, different animal individuals belonging to different species have their own attributes. तो यानी कि let's suppose there is an oxen, right? Or let us consider oxen. दो specimens हैं, एक के सींग बहुत ज्यादा बड़े हैं, वो बहुत ज्यादा aggressive भी है, he has very large teeth also, and he has a habit of running away, bolting away. The second one is strong, but he is far more docile. His horns are also a lot shorter. His hump is also much more pronounced. So for a farmer, which of these two is more desirable? पहला वाला या दूसरा वाला? लेस डिजायरेबल है, वो मार देगा, वो भाग जाएगा, सींग ज्यादा बड़े हैं, डेंजरस ऑल्सो. सेकेंड वन इज मोर यूजफुल, ही इज डॉसाइल, उसको जहां पे बांधोगे खूंटे पे वहीं पे रहेगा, ही इज नॉट गोइंग टू हिट यू, ही इज नॉट गोइंग टू रन अवे, ही इज फार मोर कंट्रोलेबल. ठीक. Now these kinds of traits start becoming visible in animals from an early stage. ठीक है. What kind of qualities do you want to be passed to the next generation of cows and bulls? The qualities of the first ox or the qualities of the second ox? Second ox. तो आप किस वाले को survive करने दोगे to adulthood so that he can procreate, he can produce the next generation? Second वाले को. पहले वाले को क्या करोगे? You will slaughter them at a young age. ठीक है. That is why young males के आपको bone fragments मिलते हैं. However, this is not desirable among females. Why? Because you'll need these female population to produce the next generation of offspring. ठीक है. And once their fertility period is over, once they become sterile, once they are old enough, only then can they be slaughtered for meat. Right? So bones of domesticated animals from Neolithic sites, इनसे पता लगता है. What else? पेंटिंग से भी पता लगता है, right? So these kinds of things are useful in telling us that agriculture and animal husbandry had replaced hunting and gathering as the most important source of food. But hunting and gathering continued to be practiced in a complementary role. So to complement agriculture and animal husbandry, hunting and gathering activities continued. Clear? Sure. Now, what were the factors which led to the emergence of agriculture and animal husbandry? A combination of ecological, climatic, and technological factors. So, the rise of agriculture and animal husbandry was facilitated by a combination of climatic, ecological, and technological factors. Okay? In fact, this is one major field of debate among historians, that why did human beings start practicing agriculture? Now, in this field, the first historian to postulate his ideas was Vincent Gordon Child. क्या बोला इसने? That human beings started practicing agriculture because they were faced with increasing ecological pressure. किस तरह का ecological pressure? Following the end of the Ice Age, certain kinds of mammals had started going extinct. किस तरह के mammals? Large woolly mammals. These included animals such as the woolly mammoth, the woolly bison, the woolly rhinoceros, etc. Right? And according to Vincent Gordon Child, since these woolly mammals were the chief source of food for the Mesolithic hunters, that is why they had to search for a new source of food. Write down. Since these represented the main food source of the Mesolithic hunters, they were forced to look for a new food source. And it was this search which led them towards agriculture. Leading them to agriculture. Clear है? Is this much clear? Now, Gordon Child के जो ideas हैं, they appear to be logical, but they are also subject to certain criticisms. क्या criticism? That the extinction of these woolly mammals had started much earlier. It had started as early as the upper Paleolithic age, when the Pleistocene had started to end and the onset of Holocene had started, right? So why was it only in the Neolithic period that finally human beings attained the knowledge of agriculture? Why not before this, right? So write down the process of the extinction of woolly mammals had been going on for almost 50,000 years. That is the Paleolithic Age, when the Pleistocene started ending. Why then did agriculture emerge in the Neolithic Age only, and why not in the upper Paleolithic Age itself? ठीक है? So on the basis of this argument, Gordon Child's hypothesis has been challenged. ऐसा ही एक सिमिलर एक्सप्लेनेशन दिया है एक और हिस्टोरियन ने, दैट इज बिनफोर्ड. इसने क्या बोला है? That it was not the result of ecological pressure, but the result of climate change and population pressure. कैसे? With the end of the ice age, the polar ice started to melt, and what happened to the sea level? It started to increase. The coastal shelves, which had been exposed, now started to recede. They became submerged. The coastline began to recede as well, and the coastal communities were forced to migrate from their original homelands. किस डायरेक्शन में? Out to the sea or inland? They were forced to migrate inland. So पहले एक बहुत बड़े रीजन में कुछ ह्यूमन बींग्स फैले हुए थे. Now the sea level has increased and the coasts have shrunk. This has forced them to migrate inland. And इस वाले रीजन में क्या होगा? The concentration of people, is it going to increase or decrease? It is going to increase. So population pressure is going to increase in this region, right? The different communities of human beings are going to come into greater contact with each other. There is going to be a great degree of friction, leading to conflict also, because there is a conflict for supply of resources, and as a result people will be forced to look for new sources of food. कहाँ पे मिलेंगे इनको new sources of food? In agriculture. इतना clear है? Write down. Binford. Population pressure. लिखो. With the end of the Great Ice Age, comma, sea levels began rising, and coastal communities were forced to migrate inland, resulting in higher population pressure. Next point. The available resources were not sufficient to sustain this pressure, and humans were forced to begin agriculture. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट लिखो. क्रिटिसिज्म. कैसे क्रिटिसाइज करा जा सकता है इसे? प्री एग्रीकल्चरल पीरियड्स में या फिर इनफैक्ट प्री इंडस्ट्रियल पीरियड में भी ह्यूमन पॉपुलेशन कैसा था? Was it very large? It was extremely small. So if you have ever seen any graph which charts human population through the years and centuries, you will find that 1800s के बाद अचानक से shoot up किया है human population because it was subsidized by industry. Before that, the growth of the rate of population was very, very incremental, very, very slow. And around this period, 6000 to 1000 BC, it was extremely low, right? So in such a scenario, when human population was already so low, will the question of population pressure even be relevant? नहीं होगा. The carrying capacity of the earth and the environment that these people were living in was more than capable of taking them on, of supporting them. ठीक है. So they had not surpassed the carrying capacity of their lands. So this question itself कि population pressure emerge हो सकता है ऐसे periods में, that is an invalid one. Secondly, ये जो inward migration of people हो रहा है, inland migration of people हो रहा है, is it affecting only selected communities? No, it is affecting all communities, those communities which are being forced to migrate inwards, as well as the original inhabitants of the inland region. Why? Because they are going to come into contact with new groups जो कि अभी तक present नहीं थे. Then why do we see that agriculture begins at one point in some cultures and at a very different stage in some other cultures? For example, in some cultures it may begin as early as 8000 or 7000 BC. In other cultures it may begin as late as 2000 BC. अगर ये pressure exert हो रहा होता, so it would have been universal and every community would have had to respond. Otherwise, they would not have been able to survive. But we do not see this happening. So write the criticism. लिखो. Binford's critics have pointed out that the idea of population pressure in the prehistoric past is an absurd one. Is an absurd one. Full stop. The total human population of the earth was a minuscule fraction of the current population. A minuscule fraction of the current population. Full stop. Therefore, the question of population pressure does not arise at all. Does not arise at all. Population pressure does not arise at all. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. Another criticism is that had population pressure been responsible for the beginning of agriculture, then it should have started simultaneously across the world. Then it would have started simultaneously across the world. Full stop. In contrast, we find that it emerged at different stages in different regions. ठीक है, तो दो एक्सप्लेनेशन हमने देखे हैं. एक दिया है गॉर्डन चाइल्ड ने, दूसरा दिया है बिनफर्ड ने. गॉर्डन चाइल्ड हैज पॉइंटेड टू ecological pressure and Binford has pointed to population pressure which have pushed human beings towards agriculture. तो ये pull factors हुए ये दोनों या push factors हुए? Push factors हुए, right? Similarly, some other historians have suggested a combination of different pull factors. So some facilitating or positive factors which allowed human beings to undertake agriculture. One of these historians says Braidwood. What does he say? That the beginning of agriculture was the result of the combination of natural human inquisitiveness, ecological changes, and technological improvements. According to him, human beings of this period possessed a great awareness of nature and the environment because of their natural curiosity, their natural inquisitiveness. They had acquired a great degree of knowledge and understanding about the environment and the impact of ecological changes on the environment over several generations. And by this point of time, technological improvements had also taken place, which allowed them to capitalize on this knowledge, on this wellspring of information to begin agriculture. So, according to Braidwood, agriculture was not simply the result of material factors, but knowledge. ठीक है. Now, इसमें काउंटर आर्ग्यूमेंट क्या दे सकते हैं हम? That not material factors but knowledge was the main factor behind the beginning of agriculture. There exist even today a number of pre-agricultural societies and communities. Do these communities lack knowledge of how the environment functions, the relationship between plants and animals, or plants and human beings? No. In fact, they have a very advanced understanding of these things. Are they unaware of ideas such as the relationship between different stages of a plant's life? No, they are aware of the idea that trees germinate from seeds, that grasses also germinate from seeds. So they are aware of the concept of seeds and the process of germination, right? Why then have they not started conducting agriculture, right? अगर केवल knowledge ही necessary requirement होता, then these people do possess the knowledge and they should have started agriculture, but they still choose not to do it, right? That means some other factors are also required. And क्या देखा गया है? That as far as the balance between food availability and demand remains stable, agriculture does not start. तो necessary factor क्या है? The destruction of this balance, the emergence of an imbalance, a shortage of food sources, that is necessary. लिख लीजिए इसको. Braidwood, according to him, the natural inquisitiveness of human beings coupled with a higher understanding of ecological changes accompanied by better technology of environmental changes of the environment, or environmental changes accompanied by better technology led towards the beginning accompanied by better technology led towards the beginning of agriculture. Full stop. In other words, comma, the basic requirement for the beginning of agriculture, the basic requirement for the beginning of agriculture is not material conditions, but knowledge. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट लिखो क्रिटिसिज्म. By observing contemporary pre-agricultural communities, we know that despite having advanced knowledge of the environment, comma, they do not begin agriculture till the balance between food availability and demand remains intact. ठीक है, till the balance between food availability and demand remains intact. तो ये हो गया braidwood. Next we have another similar explanation presented by some more recent historians. So some other historians have talked about the existence of positive feedback systems which facilitated the rise of agriculture. Now, किस तरह के positive feedback systems? Due to the warmer climate, a set of changes was triggered. The Pleistocene ecology was replaced by the Holocene ecology, dominated in the earlier period by grasslands and wetland ecology. Right? Further, the growing season became shorter or longer, right? क्योंकि ज़्यादा समय तक warmer temperatures prevail करेंगे where plants could grow. At the same time, the level of biological production, that is going to increase or decline. Increase. So primary productivity is going to increase. ऐसे में सबसे ज्यादा ग्रोथ किस चीज का होगा? Wild grass varieties. They are going to explode. Wild grass species. Some of these grasses are going to be of special importance to human beings. Why? Because they are grain bearing grasses. ठीक है? So humans, अब इसमें human factor introduce हो जाएगा. Humans began using grain bearing grasses to supplement their diets. Right? Further, अब ये जो वाइल्ड ग्रास वैरायटीज थी, they included species such as wheat, barley, several millets, maize, rice, etc. ठीक है? लेकिन ये इनकी डोमेस्टिकेटेड वैरायटीज हैं या फिर वाइल्ड वैरायटीज हैं? वाइल्ड वैरायटीज. अब जैसे आज डिफरेंट वैरायटीज ऑफ डोमेस्टिकेटेड क्रॉप्स एग्जिस्ट, वैसे ही उस समय डिफरेंट वैरायटीज ऑफ वाइल्ड क्रॉप्स आल्सो एग्जिस्टेड. हाउएवर, इनके बीच में भी क्रॉस पॉलिनेशन पॉसिबल था. राइट? एंड बिकॉज ऑफ द चेंजिंग क्लाइमेट, the frequency of this cross pollinization, cross fertilization, that is going to increase. So nature itself started to conduct a number of genetic experiments with these wild varieties of grain bearing grasses. Right? So cross fertilization is going to become more prominent, and this is going to result in the emergence of specific species of these wild varieties which are most suitable for agriculture, which have certain desirable qualities. For example, that the number and size of grains on these grasses, that is going to be much larger and higher, that they are going to be resistant to drought or flooding or water inundation, that they are not going to be flattened by strong winds, that they are not going to rot in humid conditions, that they are going to be resistant to particular varieties of pests or insects, etc. So these kinds of qualities are going to emerge in some specific wild varieties. Cross-fertilization resulted in the emergence of some desirable varieties. And human beings who till now had been simply gathering these grains now began to store them and plant them later, scatter them on the ground later on. And what did they observe? That अगर इन वाली varieties के crops के seeds को spread करते हैं rather than the other varieties, so they have more food later on, right? So through a process of trial and error, human beings capitalized upon the positive feedback systems to start cultivation. Is this clear? तो इसको लिख लेते हैं. लिखिए. Due to climatic and ecological changes, the grassland ecology became dominant. Full stop. Grain bearing grasses such as wheats, millets, barley, rice, etc. began emerging in the vast grasslands. Full stop. The longer growing season, comma, warmer climate, and higher primary productivity resulted in cross fertilization, which yielded more robust species. Next point. Gradually, humans began to selectively store and plant these grains. Gradually, humans began to selectively store and plant these grains, thus resulting in the emergence of agriculture. Okay? Now, while this particular hypothesis has talked about positive feedback systems, but they have highlighted the use of humans also in utilizing these factors. There is another set of historians, more recent historians, who have said that the beginning of agriculture was the result of a few happy accidents in which human beings had very little active role to play. Because of the changing because of the changing climatic and natural and ecological environment, because of the changing climate and ecology, certain species became extinct and others were forced to evolve. As a result of which, evolution is direction में ले गया उनको naturally, that they became more suitable for cultivation and domestication. Human beings had very little role in selectively breeding them, right? Next लिखो. सिमिलरली, हाँ, नेक्स्ट थ्योरी आप लिख सकते हो, सिमिलरली some other scholars have suggested that the ongoing climatic and ecological changes resulted in the extinction of certain species and evolution of others, so that the surviving species were naturally amenable to domestication. कोल्ड हार्श क्लाइमेट्स में हमको किस तरह के मैमल्स दिखते हैं? फॉर एग्जांपल, लार्ज मैमल्स और स्मॉल मैमल्स? Large mammals, because they need to be able to dominate their surroundings and overcome competition for limited food sources. So process of competition makes those animals the fittest, or those individuals the fittest, which are the largest, fastest, most aggressive, most fierce. On the other hand, in the warmer climates, what do we find? That unhi species के अगर cousins होंगे, they are going to be much smaller, right? Because they need to be able to conserve their energy. The biological processes are oriented towards greater efficiency rather than dominance, right? So parameters of being the fittest वो change हो जाते हैं अलग अलग climates में, and that is the type of change that we are seeing. ठीक है? तो जो जंगली लेट अस से गोट्स, माउंटेन गोट्स, क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है उसमें? बहुत बड़े बड़े सींग होते हैं, इनफैक्ट 2 to 3 मीटर लॉन्ग सींग हॉर्न्स कर्व्ड ऑन टू ईच अदर, चाहे आप मार्खोर को देख लीजिए या फिर माउंटेन आइबेक्स वगैरह को देख लीजिए. वेयर एज डोमेस्टिकेटेड वैरायटीज में क्या दिखता है? 2 or 3 इंचेस के मैक्सिमम हॉर्न्स होते हैं. हाउ डू यू थिंक दिस काइंड ऑफ चेंज टुक प्लेस? Because in the wild environment, those mountain goats need to compete against each other for their territory, for sexual partners. This kind of competition is not necessary in more warmer and more abundant climates. Okay? So because of a series of such natural happy accidents, human beings got access to varieties or species of plants or animals which were naturally more suitable for domestication. So it almost fell into their lap. This is what this particular theory is advocating. Is this clear? Sure. Now, out of these 5 sets of theories, which of them do you think is the best one to explain the beginning of agriculture? Last one? अच्छा, कोई और नहीं? पहला वाला नहीं? गॉड एंड चाइल्ड वाला, या फिर बिनफर्ड वाला, या बेडफोर्ड वाला, या पॉजिटिव फीडबैक सिस्टम्स वाला? पॉजिटिव फीडबैक सिस्टम्स वाला भी. इनफैक्ट ऑल ऑफ दीज थ्योरीज हैव सम ऑफ देयर ओन मेरिट्स. क्रिटिसिज्म तो सब में है, लेकिन मेरिट्स भी सबके हैं. सो इन द एंड हमको कंक्लूड किस सेंटिमेंट के साथ करना चाहिए अगर क्वेश्चन आता है तो? कि कोई एक सिंगल फैक्टर रिस्पॉन्सिबल नहीं था. द बिगिनिंग ऑफ द प्रोसेस ऑफ फूड प्रोडक्शन वाज अ lengthy and complicated process, right? It involved the combination of a number of factors. और हर जगह का क्लाइमेट, इकोलॉजी, जियोग्राफी, ह्यूमन बीइंग्स का जो वहां पे रह रहे हैं उनका वैल्यू सिस्टम भी अलग अलग होता है, राइट? एंड it is not necessary that the same set of factors is going to work in the same manner in all these scenarios, right? It is in fact going to be a combination of different sets of factors working in different regions, working in different contexts, and working in different time periods to result in the emergence of agriculture. ठीक है? Write down. Next conclusion की तरह लिख सकते हो. On the basis of these arguments, it appears that no single factor was responsible for the beginning of agriculture. Full stop. Rather, different sets of factors that is both push and pull factors may have been responsible in different periods and regions. All right. So, what was the most significant development during the Neolithic period? The beginning of agriculture and animal husbandry, the transformation of human beings from food consumer to food producer. नेक्स्ट हमको देखना है कि इस चेंज की वजह से और क्या क्या चेंजेस इंड्यूस हुए. चेंजेस ड्यू टू the emergence of agriculture and animal husbandry. Some changes we have already seen. For example, the emergence of pottery, changes in technology, specifically the invention of the wheel, right? कुछ और changes, सेटलमेंट और ड्वेलिंग पैटर्न में कोई चेंज आएगा? क्या चेंज आएगा? Sedentism became the norm now, right? Even during the Mesolithic period, while human beings had started settling in a particular place for an extended period of time, they were still forced to seasonally migrate from place to place in search of food. Now all of that is going to come to an end. अब क्या इमर्ज होंगे? Permanent settlements with permanent artificial houses. ठीक है? Write down. Sedentary life emerged as a universal feature of the Neolithic Age. Permanent villages emerged. With artificial dwellings, including wattle and daub huts and mud brick houses. Wattle and daub huts and mud brick houses. Right? Subsistence pattern. We have already covered. क्या देखने के लिए मिला? That while hunting and gathering continued, they became supplementary activities. They were no longer the core activities for obtaining food. It was replaced by animal husbandry and agriculture. Human beings began to produce their own food. Right? Now, with the beginning of food production, some changes are also going to become visible in economic activities or organization or exchange. क्या देखने के लिए मिलेगा? The commodification of food is going to take place. Food is going to be ascribed a particular economic value that is beyond the fulfillment of the needs of consumption only. It could become a medium of exchange. So with this, what is going to emerge? Trade, barter system के through trade. लिखो. With the beginning of agriculture and animal husbandry, comma, with the beginning of agriculture and animal husbandry, comma, economic exchange became possible. Economic exchange became possible. Full stop. Commodities such as grains, animals, animal hide, cloth, etc. were used to barter goods and services. तो शुरुआत में ये जो एक्सचेंज हो रहा है इसका दायरा बहुत बड़ा रहा होगा या छोटा रहा होगा? लोकल कम्युनिटीज एक दूसरे में बहुत छोटा रहा होगा. देन विद द इन्वेंशन ऑफ द व्हील the scope became enlarged and inter or extra local trade started to take place. Write down. Initially, comma, the scope of this exchange must have been local. The scope of this exchange must have been local. But following the invention of the wheel, trade over longer distances became possible. Over longer distances became possible. Next. Social, political and economic organization. Would any changes be visible? क्या देखने के लिए मिलता है? Settled societies में some new priorities emerge, such as maintenance of security and maintenance of order. अब ये security और order कौन देगा? Some governance structure, right? Some political organization is going to emerge. Either it can be a tribal chiefdom or a democratic setup or a monarchical setup. अलग अलग उसके variations होते हैं, लेकिन ये सारी चीजें करने के लिए कोई ना कोई सर्विस प्रोवाइडर होना चाहिए who is able to wield power, who is able to protect the people of the settlement, protect their property, etc. Right? And therefore, political differentiation is going to start becoming visible. Write down. With the emergence of settled society, comma, a more developed form of political organization became necessary to provide order and security. To provide order and security. Full stop. Now, इस समय in this rudimentary phase of human society, what do you think was the nature of the political system which emerged? Was it monarchical or democratic or oligarchical or tribal in nature? Tribal in nature. So write down subpoint. According to most historians, comma, the Neolithic people lived under a tribal polity. Lived under a tribal polity. ठीक है? Are we aware of the exact nature of power distribution? What were the roles that the tribal chiefs performed? What were the functionaries and their roles under him? What were the duties of the ordinary person living in that tribe? ये सब हमको पता लगता है? नहीं पता लगता है, right? In the same point you can write down. However, we are not aware of the specific nature of power distribution. But it would be safe to say that some form of power hierarchy had emerged. Some form of power hierarchy had emerged. Do we have any evidence to support this claim? There's a place called मेहरगढ़, बलूचिस्तान में है. यहाँ से This is a Neolithic village which emerged as early as 7000 BC, and this was the location where wheat cultivation first started. 7000 BC में हमको इसका evidence मिलता है, right? And from here we find a large mud structure which has been interpreted to be a granary, right? क्या होता है granary? A place where grains are stored, right? अब modern government जो होती हैं, they maintain a treasury in order to store their wealth. उस समय wealth को किस form में store किया जाता होगा? In the form of grains. So this granary would have represented the treasury of that period. And अगर treasury है तो इसका मतलब government भी होना चाहिए. ठीक है? This is one example. Another example from Mehergarh itself and also from other settlements in northwestern India, Neolithic sites वहाँ पे भी available हैं. We find that in these villages there were different types of homes. The vast majority of homes were rectangular and small in size. लेकिन पूरे विलेज में एक, दो या मैक्सिमम 3 घर सर्कुलर होंगे और लार्जर होंगे, राइट? एंड दिस रिप्रेजेंट्स द सेंटर ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट, राइट? यहां पे कौन रहता होगा? उस कबीले का चीफ, उस विलेज का चीफ, राइट? सो द ruling class used to live here. Clear? So these are a couple of examples to drive our point home. Then economic stratification. Do you think it was visible or not? And economic stratification or the division of people on the basis of economic status is always an outcome of agriculture. क्यों? क्योंकि agriculture के साथ क्या emerge होता है? The concept of private property, right? Now, the amount of wealth that is accumulated by an individual depends upon their effort and the effort of their families or other corporate group and their ability to organize, invest and further grow this wealth. As compared to pre-agricultural activities, जहां पे पूरी की पूरी community का cooperation चाहिए होता है, agriculture depends primarily upon the individual's ability to or individual's own acumen to organize the resources around him. Is this clear? Now, in such a scenario, the emergence of the concept of private property is a natural phenomenon. And distribution कैसा होगा हमेशा private property का? Is it going to be equal? No, it is always going to be unequal. किसी के पास ज्यादा होगा, किसी के पास कम होगा. And is this reflected? Is this economic disparity reflected in the archaeological record also? Yes, from the houses also, some are larger, some are more elaborate, some are of better quality, some are poorer, some are smaller in size. ठीक है? ज्यादा कौन से टाइप के हाउसेस मिले हैं? बड़े वाले या छोटे वाले? छोटे वाले, poor quality वाले. That means there are a few wealthy people among a large number of relatively poorer people. ठीक है? Similar thing you can see in the types of grave goods that are found. The grave goods found from the graves of rich people are going to be of high value. तो gold का necklace मिल सकता है या फिर किसी semi precious stone का necklace मिल सकता है, right? Or some other ornaments or high quality tools or weapons can be found. And what about the ordinary people's graves? Ordinary items are going to be found. ठीक है? Write down. Economic stratification within the society also became more visible. Economic stratification within the society also became more visible. And a clear distinction between the rich and poor had started to emerge. Between the rich and poor had started to emerge. Full stop. The unequal distribution of wealth is considered to be a natural outcome of the transformation from nomadism to sedentism. Nomadism to sedentism. The point earlier, wealth was considered to be owned by the entire community as a whole. Full stop. With the beginning of agriculture, or next subpoint, with the beginning of agriculture, comma, individual effort, expertise, and enterprise were required for production. And the concept of private property began emerging. ठीक है? Next subpoint. As a result, comma, different individuals, groups, and communities owned resources unequally. Full stop. Next main point. This unequal distribution of wealth is reflected in the variations in the houses and graves of the Neolithic people. ठीक है? These are some prominent changes. कुछ और changes रह गए हैं. These we are going to talk about in tomorrow's lecture. Clear है? समझ में आया है ये? जो notes दिए थे पूरे पढ़ लिए हैं? ठीक है. चलिए then. If there are no doubts, I'll be ending this class now. All right. Thank you for your time, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.